So the one part of our code that we haven't explored yet is this add case. And to make it a little bit easier to read, let's jump to our editor so we can look at it with syntax highlighting. So I'm going to scroll down and we'll get to this add section at around line 87. So now remember before how we wanted to clean up our variables using the MySQL real escape string function? Well, we're going to have to do that again this time, but with a lot more fields. So if we used a statement that included MySQL real escape string 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, that's going to be really long and a little bit hard to read. So what we're doing here is looping through each one of these values and running it through MySQL real escape string, and then adding it to an array we can use later. And then when we want to use it in the query itself, what we're doing is imploding these values with a comma and 2 single quotes on either side. And then when we compile them together, just like when we created an HTML list this way, we have to wrap it with individual single quotes in order to complete the full string. So if you remember in our query that we looked at in the browser, it showed the column names here and then the values here, but they have to be in the same order. So we made sure before we looped through this array of inputs to put them in the right order. Now these are all names of the inputs in the form that we submitted. So as we loop through each one of these, we pull out the key, which is an incrementing number starting at 0. So the first time this runs, the key will be 0, and the input name will be first. And then we actually use the same variable in order to replace the item first with the escaped string from the form. And we're getting that value by using the post variables. Now this input name here will be first at this time, and this will line up with the name entry in the form. So if we scrolled up to the form here, you'd see that the first name here has the name of first. So when we use the post variables, it's going to have the key of first. I'm going to scroll back down to this add case. So the first time this looped through when we submitted our form, this would read inputs 0, because that's the first key, equals the escaped version of the string Chris, which is the post first variable. And then this will loop through again for the birth year. The key will be 1, and the value here would be 1979. We escape that, again, just to make sure there's no quotes in there, and we assign it to inputs with the key of 1. We loop through again for favorite band, again for shoe size, username, and password. Once we have all of that, then we implode them with the commas, and if we jump back to the browser, we'd see something that looked like this as that string. Chris, 1979, anyone named David, and so on. Next, we construct our SQL query, and then we run it using MySQL query. Now before, we'd always pass the query directly to here, but oftentimes we'll want to separate the query into a separate variable before we pass it to MySQL query, especially when it's particularly long. As we've done before, we assign the result from MySQL query to the result variable, and then we add a notice that will display at the top of the page that includes the compiled SQL query, and we're doing that just to make it easier to see what's going on behind the scenes. Now if there's something wrong with this query, result would return false instead of the object from MySQL query. And we can use that to construct any error handling afterwards. So we can say if result, which would be a valid object if we ran MySQL query, and thus would be true because it exists, then we would add a notice that said the person was added. Otherwise, we'd want to display any errors that occurred as part of the processing. So we would add the MySQL error to another notice. And finally, we're going to break out of this. Okay, so let's demo this one more time, but thinking about how the code is working in the background. I'm going to go back to the browser, and here we have our list of people. Now I'll click Add Person. Now remember this added the add form action to the URL, which would add the form to the output variable, and then because that output variable wasn't empty, it would not continue to add the list of users as part of the output. I'll go ahead and fill this out. And then I'll click Add Entry. Now the action here said add, so what it will do at this point is attempt to construct the query that will insert the data into the database. We'll do all of the escaping as part of a loop through all of the variables. We'll compile those together using implode, and then we'll pass the query into MySQL query. Since that ends up being successful, it adds the notice the person was added to the list of notices to